Alright, here we are in 3D Studio Max again. I want to make this surface here that cool wood siding, those planks. So let's just make sure we've got V-Ray material here in our slot. Go to Diffuse Map, click on Bitmap, and let me navigate to where I need to go. Okay, there was the original. Here's the one I fixed up. So that's the one we want. Just click on it, hit open. Whoops. Alright, here's our sample, or our swatch, I should say. Let's turn that blur down to 0 so we get a nice crisp looking wood. Let's make sure and set the real world. Now to do that, we'll need to look at the image again and kind of eyeball how wide we think that is and how tall we think it is. I'd say 10 feet wide by 10 foot square would be right there, so let's say 13 feet tall. 10 feet, 13 feet. You could do math and figure out exactly how wide each one of those planks is if you wanted to. I don't need to do that here. Let's close that. Here's our swatch currently. Now let's go back to parent. Remember, we're inside the diffuse slot right now. So this is our map. Now we're back to our overall texture. And let's just go down at the bottom and add our maps here. So bump slot is right here. Now sometimes it's easiest to just copy the diffuse slot, paste it here, not as an instance, but as a copy. Then go in here again, and we'll have our real world still set up properly, and we just have to change our image to the bump map we made, which is wood bump. Now you can see what that does here. Let's make this a little bigger. My computer can handle it. Ooh, maybe. You can see those grooves look like they are actually inset a little bit now. And I'll try to exaggerate them so you can really see. Now sometimes bump you don't want at 0 blur because it starts looking a bit sharp, maybe you'd say. But sometimes when it's on 1 blur, it starts looking kind of soft. So it starts kind of stretching out those seams there that I wanted to be nice and tight. So maybe somewhere in between, maybe like 0.3 is good. Yeah, that looks kind of like a rustic wood. I like that. So if I exaggerate a little bit and put this to 300, it can go all the way up to 1000. Now it looks really rustic, kind of rough. If I put it at 0, it looks completely smooth. I think 30 was right about where we want to be. Okay, now let's copy again. And that's just so it keeps the settings we've already set up. And then we will change, so the reflect slot is here. Let's paste it there. Go into the map, change it to our reflection, wood reflection. Might not see much of a change here. 0.3 blur is okay for that too. Okay, so you can see instead of the color now, it's going off of that map. If you turn off Fresnel reflections here and turn on our little background, we might see that wood reflecting a little bit. Not much. You can see a little bit of color getting picked up in there. So this is a good chance to tell you one other technique. If you turn this map down, basically this means that how much effect this map is going to have on the reflection. So if we turn it down to 60, that means it's only having 60% effect. And the other 40% is going to come from this color here. So if I turn that way up, you'll see this thing become a lot more reflective, like that. And obviously that's overkill. Let's turn the Fresnel reflections back on. That might be close to right. Now, the important thing is reflection glossiness. I talked about that a little bit before. That wood isn't going to be reflecting like a mirror. It's going to be more like a kind of a softer reflection. Maybe like that. We'll see how that looks. I don't know, that doesn't really look like wood. It looks more like a vinyl or something. Something plasticky. That's not bad right there. So really the reflection on this is going to be pretty subtle. I'm going to put this back up to 80. So there'll just be a really slight reflection on that thing. Kind of like that. But that's how you make the reflections. Now, of course, you can control the glossiness too with a map, so that in some places it would reflect like a mirror, like it's wet or something, and then other parts it's maybe dry, so it reflects more, the reflection is more spread out like that. Everything can be controlled by a map in here. You see these little slots next to everything. So use your imagination to come up with really unique and cool materials using maps. Let's put this thing on here real quick and see what it looks like. I forgot to show you this before, but assign material to selection. If you select it in here and hit that button with this material selected, oh, and we didn't want to make that the override material. Let's change it to wood and apply it. We got to put our map on there. Go to the modifier stack, UVW map, and we can just do box again and real world. Make sure we go into our diffuse map and make sure it's show standard map in viewport, just like that. Let's apply these. Let's apply our window material to all these. Make sure they get their maps. Okay, we want that to be, that face needs to be sub-object number 2. We need to do the same thing. Okay, to unselect this poly, we need to go out of sub-object mode and then select. Go back into sub-object mode for this new poly. Set ID to 2. Go out of sub-object mode. Do likewise on this one. It's a bit tedious, I guess. Like so. Let's make sure they're all mapped. You can actually just apply the UVW map all at the same time. Whoops. Not that. And then they'll just have the same map on all of them. It'll basically be like an instance. Okay, so those are now all mapped. Now let's see what this renders like. Ooh, it's looking pretty good. Okay, I'll pause for a second while I render. Okay, we're still waiting. But you can see that my rendering is starting to appear. This is the fun part. Super exciting. Each bucket renders. You see a new part of your building. And of course, everything on here looks terrible. This Smurf blue. But my siding looks sweet. Not really, but it looks pretty good. Now, remember we were talking about the tiling issue. You can see a little bit of repeat going on in that wood, but it's subtle enough and it's spread out enough that it really doesn't catch your eye. So that's not a bad material there. I did a fairly good job of making it tileable. You can see there's no seam going vertically, and the repeat going left to right isn't that bad. So there's a material. It's pretty cool looking. We'll get some metal next on this roof and get all these doors and all the different materials applied. I don't even know what I'm going to put on here, but we'll figure it out together. So our rendering's coming along pretty nice. Hopefully you understand the basics of materials a little bit and maps and using them to create full-blown textures. And yeah, we'll keep going with this. In the next video I'll make a few more materials and apply them to the building, and then we'll just run with it and we'll move on to the next section.